Power Talk, brought to you by ABB. Power and productivity for a better world.
Now later in the programme we'll be showing you how some Soweto residents have had to endure the daily ordeal of blackouts. How much backlog is there in the infrastructure investment? It's a jam-packed show, but first the news with PowerPoints. In South Africa, thousands of coal workers seeking a 14% wage increase walked off the job in a strike that could dent exports and hurt power supplies in Africa's largest economy. South Africa's state utility, Eskom, relies on coal for most of its electricity production, and Eskom has coal stockpiles for an average of 38 days, but the utility remain concerned. The African Development Bank has approved a technical cooperation agreement with the government of Denmark for the establishment of a sustainable energy fund for Africa. The agreement, which has been budgeted for $57 million, is meant for capacity building and investment in sustainable energy for 5 years. In Berlin, Germany's national railway operator has announced a deal to buy hydroelectric power from generator RWE AG, part of a plan to increase its use of renewable energy. Deutsche Bahn AG said the deal, worth more than €1 billion, will see RWE provide power from 14 hydroelectric plants between 2014 and 2028. Now let's get right to the heart of the power cut story. We're going to a place in South Africa where blackouts are as regular as breakfast. Let's go now to Bram Fisher community in Soweto as the cold of a winter's night creeps in. This is the cold reality of the power cuts. This is Bram Fisher in Soweto, Johannesburg, South Africa. It is a chilly midwinter evening. Power blackouts are a way of life here. Tembisile Langa lives with her mother and child, often without power.
It's a must. I must make porridge for the baby. I must make it early and she can only eat it late in the evening. It's cold and now she has flu. I don't even make her milk bottle because I'm scared she could get diarrhea, because the clinic said it's bad to give her cold milk.
We've arranged meetings and even marched to Eskom. They told us they would come and check out the problem. They did come to check and said they would make sure the blackouts don't happen every day. And now it's worse. We still have blackouts every day.
Many residents question how long people will put up with this.
People have been so patient. I never see them toying or doing whatever, like other areas where you find unrest as a service delivery.
People say here these blackouts are not only annoying, they are also expensive.
In a week, it can cost you up to, because when you buy 9 kg of liquid gas, it's about 160. It takes you something like 7 days. It can cost you up to 200 in a week, including the Eskom electricity.
This is one answer, the Dangali family's generator.
We buy the petrol like every week, like 60 rand, 70 rand, just to get the petrol so that it can run for the 4 hours that when the electricity is gone and stuff.
So an expensive short-term answer to a huge problem. So what we found out on that story is that a lot of people who live in Bram Fisher, they actually SMS home on their way back to see if there's any power. It's like a daily ritual. So in the studio with us this evening, men who know all about the infrastructure issues and power. Firstly, former City Power Chief and now CEO of Suzlon, South Africa. That's the Indian-based green power company, Silas Zimu. Also with us, journalist and commentator on energy, managing editor of EE Publishing, Yellend. Gentlemen, you've seen the story there. Let's start off with you, Silas. I mean, how do sometimes these dense communities have these problems with power?
I think the main challenge on the distribution side, which is where the most customers are connected onto the grid, is the capacity of the cables that have been given. A lot of these guys, like Bram Fisher, they were given less than 60 amps. So probably they're sitting on 20 amp breakers, meaning they cannot have what other people in suburbs who have 60 amp breakers can do. But what then happen is a lot of the townships, you get backyard shacks, and these people get connected onto the grid, and that overloads the system, and then you get all these blackouts. But you should not run away from the fact that there's lots of tampering onto the system. And every time the people tamper onto a cable, whatever join you cause or form on a cable, it's actually a problem for the future. You know, cables are meant not to have too many joints. So every time you get a joint on the cable, you have high probabilities of failures on that joint itself.
Chris?
Yeah, if I may add to that, one of the issues causing a lot of problems in blackouts is the question of electricity theft, and secondly, the question of cable theft. So let's first of all look at electricity theft. Illegal connections onto lines and cables and junction boxes and distribution boards generally serve to overload the transformers that are feeding these circuits. And of course, people who use who are stealing electricity have no incentive to use it wisely or cautiously because they are not paying for it. So they can use their stove as an electric heater, and they can do all kinds of other things, leave appliances on for extended periods, and this causes extended overloading. Just as serious, of course, is the cable issue. Cable theft causes regular and repeated blackouts. We're
going to go looking a little bit more deeply into that right now. Now, one of the big theories behind these power cuts is the crumbling infrastructure. And one doesn't have to look too far to find it. One man who knows where to look is journalist James Stein. James Stein is a respected journalist and a contributor to Power Talk. He is a man with a passion for energy, and one of his pet hates is the state of infrastructure and distribution in the city of Johannesburg. He took us on a journey to show us some of the dilapidated infrastructure around the city of Johannesburg.
We're here in Boysens, standing under a pylon that's seen better days, and it essentially speaks to the problem of municipalities not investing in new infrastructure, distribution infrastructure, because you see Eskom generates the power at the power plant, and then they transmit it through transmission lines. They're in fact building 5,000 miles new transmission lines throughout the country. But municipalities, about 187 of them, need to invest in distribution networks because they are the ones that take the electricity from Eskom and put it into your and my house. But at this stage, infrastructure is starting to fall to pieces, like you can see with this pylon right here. I mean, if the necessary amounts were being invested into distribution infrastructure, we wouldn't be seeing this.
James says 60% of the residential energy is the responsibility of City Power, Johannesburg's energy distributor.
In general, the blackouts that we're currently seeing when the system's under pressure, everybody starts to blame Eskom, but the problem should be laid at the door of utilities like City Power. Utilities are supposed to be investing a certain percentage of their revenue in refurbishment, upgrading and maintenance of their distribution networks, which is the actual network that gets the power from Eskom's power stations into your house. This is not happening for various reasons. It's not necessarily only a money problem, it could be a skills problem as well. You've got aging skills, people that are reaching retirement age, people don't know how to fix the problems anymore.
The sightseeing was not done as we went to one of Johannesburg's suburbs, where high fences may make for good neighbours, but not necessarily a good neighbourhood.
So over here we've got a little substation. It's these kind of things that are targeted as well for their copper that's inside. There's a couple 100 kilograms of copper in a substation like this, and you know, if the graffiti artists can get to it in a secluded neighborhood like this in the suburbs, it shouldn't be too big of a problem for a syndicate who's after the copper either.
So, gentlemen, do you think James has got a future there as a TV journalist? Maybe he has. We actually invited City Power to be part of this debate, but unfortunately they didn't respond. So, Silas, straight off the block, what's your reaction to that?
I think a mix of things have happened. It's not true that only municipalities are supplying the customers. Eskom has got a big role to play as well. But I think if you look at the tariff structure of South Africa and you look at how much utilities like City Power is invested on the capital expenditure, let alone the operational expenditure, which is where it's really linked to your tariff. There's no way that we could afford. In the past 6 years, City Power has invested R1 billion a year on capital expenditure. This is the money that the city has raised, irrespective of whether you and I have paid or not. So, you know, when you look at these things, you have to look at them to say, if it's cost reflectivity, would we have afforded that 1 billion? I don't think we would have afforded it. I mean, we're complaining about the 30% increase that we get hammered with every year. But there's also an element of truth to say there's not enough being invested. That not enough comes a long way back from 1930, as you've stated. But who has to be blamed for it? These infrastructures are meant to be minimally maintained. It's not like you wake up every day and look at what do you do to a tower. So, but the clip shows something that's very interesting, that you know, the tower and the overhead conductor is not connected, but there's no customer complaining about power outages. So the network itself, you'll never understand it. Don't just look at one tower and think, okay, it's off, there's no electricity. Those customers are connected via other networks. You know, the web is very big, and that interconnectivity helps the utilities to then say, if we have to do this work here, how do we feed the customers? The truth of the matter is the infrastructure, the substations and the power lines are more than 40 years old. I always say to people, you know, I was not born when they were built. But I had to come up with solutions on how do we keep them going. When the regulator structures the tariff, the process of tariffing has to be very, very scrutinized in a way that, you know, when Eskom gets given a tariff approval, it's in the financial year that is outside what municipalities do. So you find that, you know, by law, by the constitution, the utilities through their mayors, through their mayoral committees, are the service authorities. It doesn't say regulator. Sure. And then they can choose who become the service provider. Hence, most of the time you find that whatever the decisions they have taken themselves becomes the tariff, irrespective of what the regulator put in place.
Okay, Chris, you come in here. I mean, one thing that Silas mentioned there about how customers should be complaining, you're a man who's complained in his time about power supply. Does it actually do any good?
Well, just a point that I'd like to make towards Silas is that we must remember that Joburg has amongst the highest electricity tariffs in South Africa, a subject that has caused for great concern for the citizens of Johannesburg. A few other points that I'd like to come in on, and I think it's right what James said, that, you know, when the power goes out, we blame Eskom. Eskom, of course, is the monopoly, and one of the burdens of being a monopoly is that they have a big brand, and everybody knows their name. And when the lights go out, they blame Eskom. And I sit on Twitter watching what people are saying, and you cannot believe the flaming of Eskom that goes on Twitter. You know, every time the lights go out, the things that are said are very, must be very hurtful to Eskom. But as I say, I consider that to be one of the burdens of being a big supplier. But let's get to the heart of the matter. There is an investment backlog suggested at about 30 billion rands in the municipal and Eskom distribution sector, and that has caused you know, infrastructure to age beyond its limits, and that's causing a lot of blackouts. But the question we have to ask is, what caused the lack of investment? And the answer there is the uncertainty around the restructuring of the electricity distribution industry. There's been, this uncertainty has extended for a period of 20 years, and during that 20 years, municipalities and Eskom, for that matter, have been reluctant to perhaps spend what they should be spending on distribution infrastructure, because perhaps those assets would be taken away from them and put in some other financial entity. So in the distribution sector, people have spent perhaps somewhat less than they should have been spending.
Okay, Chris,
30 billion rands less.
Hold that thought there. We're going to talk a lot more about this in the second half.